Good evening. Hello. It's around 10:15 on a Wednesday night. Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Today was Chavtes Tevis, and tonight and tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh Shvat. If you haven't davened, might have yet, although you probably have, unless you're in California or in Hawaii. Don't forget to say Yalla V'Yavi. Now, this is our 7th class, and it's our 7th and final class on the sequence of the Maa'marim Basi Ligani Ma'amarim. We had 2 classes on the Basi Ligani Ma'amarim from Friday night. We had 4 classes on Basi Ligani Ma'amarim from Motzei Shabbos Kodesh. And the way we did it was we learned a half a Mamer and a half a Mamer. First we did a half a Mamer, Basi Ligani Ma'amarim, the first Mamer in one class. Then we did the first half of Basi Ligani Ma'amarim, the second Mamer, in 2 classes, and then we repeated the same thing for the second half. But in this kuntris, between the 2 Maa'marim, which were Friday night and Motzei Shabbos Kodesh, or the Mamer of Shabbos afternoon, there was a Chassidus 3 times in about 30 hours. It's remarkable. It's amazing. And we're going to learn the middle Mamer now. For those of you who have been on this journey, you know that parts of this Mamer I've already read when we were learning the first half of the both Basi Liganis, because it seems to me that part of what the Rabbi is saying in this Mamer is actually clearer in a way. It's more explicit than what it says in the Basi Liganis themselves. And again, if you've been following us, you know that what I presented in our discussion is that the nekuda of the Mamer Basi Ligani Ma'amarim is that there's a koyach of Nimna and Nemnois to mechaber hafchim. A koyach which is not only high, but it's high to the extent that we say it's beyond logic, beyond understanding. Fundamentally beyond understanding, not beyond my understanding or your understanding or his understanding or its understanding, but beyond seichel altogether, that allows for the chibur of hafchim, the bringing together of opposites. This plays itself out in the first half of the Mamer in Shemes, in the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kifi Mase Ani Nikra, and then of course Eilav Eilav Mideisav, and then Kifi Shani Nichtav Ani Nikra and Kifi Shani Nichtav Ani Nikra. And the second half of the Mamer, it plays itself out in Shem Tzvois, in Milchama, that when you're fighting a war and you have a moired and you have an opposition, this when you reveal the Keach HaAtzmos. So really, even though the 2 topics seem quite different, the first half of the Mamer deals with Shemes, which is lofty and mystical. And the second half of the Mamer deals with Milchama, which is basic and involved in conflict. They share this constant. And part of what happens in this middle Mamer, Vayehu Bishalach, is the same idea. The Rebbe is going to explain the role of Parei in the Mamer. I mean, the Nakud of the Mamer is, what's the role of Parei? Who needs Parei? Why does it have to say Vayehu Bishalach Parei Esam, as if Parei takes us out of Mitzrayim? Shouldn't it say Vayehi Behoitzi Hashem Yisrael miMitzrayim? Why are we mentioning Parei? And of course the answer is, the reference to Parei is because Parei is a contributor to Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the final answer is going to be that Parei is a contributor to Yetzias Mitzrayim because he brought the Jewish people to Teshuva. So Parei, the severe adversity, the ultimate adversity, brings out the deepest koiches. And again, it's the same principle of a keach ha'atzmos nimna nimnois, which is mechaber hafchim. That through Parei you magala the keach ha'tshuva. That's what the Mamer is going to be about. And we're going to get straight to it. The Mamer is, it's not long, but it's not short either. It's 6.5 amudim. But I think it's easy. I think it reads pretty easy. It's written very, very clearly. And like I said, there's really one point from beginning to end. There's a lot of secondary points, but there's one nekuda, that when Yidden leave Mitzrayim, it's as if we're saying Yashakoyach to Parei. And the question is, why are we telling Parei Yashakoyach? Parei is the enemy. Parei is the bad guy. And the final answer is because Parei has aided us to Teshuva, and this contributes to the Nyan of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So if you have the kuntris, it's page Chav Gimel. Looks like this. Yeah. We'll begin to read from the beginning of the Mamer. Vayehu Bishalach Parei Esam, when Yidden left Mitzrayim, the Torah describes the Jewish people's departure from Egypt as though it was Parei who's sending the Jewish people out of the land. Vayehu Bishalach, when Parei sent, So it says in Chassidus, why does it say Vayehu Bishalach Pari, as though Pari is sending us out? Shouldn't it say rather Vayehi Hashem Yisrael Mitzrayim? So the Torah 8 answers, because when Yidden left Mitzrayim, Pari sent along with them gifts. And the gifts were Pe'edes Vanaf, which means branches. I'm embarrassed to say, but I Googled the word Pe'edes. And it means branches or parts of a tree, decorations of some sort. This is what it says in Torah 8. What is the pnimius of this? Through the Jewish people being exiled in Egypt. And the Egyptians subdued and enslaved the Jewish people. This process affected that when the Mitzrayim made the Yidden work, and the Yidden did that work, it elevated the sparks of godliness which were embedded in Mitzrayim from creation, from the Kalim of Tei. And the process of Yidden going into Mitzrayim and slaving, and then leaving Mitzrayim and taking the sparks with them is Bechinas Keich HaTzemech. It's the phenomena of the power of Tzmicha. The Eibishter created the world with 10 utterances. Everybody knows this. And the Mishnah says he could have created it with 1. He chose to create it with 10 for the purposes of Litin Schartev and Lahanish, right? But of course we understand that the 10 utterances of creation are only Klolim. Specifically, the Eibishter created, there's a Lashon someplace, Nivraim Ein Kates. So there's Nivraim Ein Kates. More specifically, there's Maa'mar Ein Kates, right? Every creation has its own oisius. But some of the Ma'amaris are Mahavim. Some of the Ma'amaris create things, like when the Eibishter said, he created Oyer, Yesh Me'ayin. When the Eibishter said Yehi Rakiyah, he created the Rakiyah, Yesh Me'ayin. But when the Eibishter said Tatzei Haaretz Desha, he didn't create anything new. The earth already existed. Tatzei Haaretz Desha was a koyach. It's one of the 10 Ma'amaris. And it's the koyach for life. The earth, which already exists, was embedded with a koyach for life, that when you plant seeds, things will grow. So the koyach HaTzemeach Sheba'aretz is a creation of the Eibush. It's one of the son of Ma'amaris, pardon me. But I don't see it as a Mamer which physically created a new creation, like the Mamer Yihye and Hirakia and Himaeres. But rather, it's a Mamer that puts a new koyach into an already existent creation. The Aretz exists. Tacha Aretz Desha adds to the Aretz the prospect, the promise, the possibility, the power of creating agricultural life. So there's no new physical creation, there's a new spiritual or living gift offered to the world, offered to the earth through the Mamer Tacha Aretz Desha. And of course, now that you have a Koyach HaTzemeach, you plant a seed. And when you plant a seed, something grows. If the Eibush had not put the Koyach HaTzemeach on the earth, you can plant all the seeds you want, nothing would grow. The reason the earth produces life is because the Eibush put into the ground Koyach HaTzemeach. And of course, we don't believe that the seed itself creates life. We believe that the earth creates new life, but the seed is simply a catalyst or a trigger or a suggestion. But the earth produces new life with the Koyach HaTzemeach that the Eibush planted, and the Rebbe argues the same is true as Golus. Says the Rebbe Latzmiach Yeshua Yisrael, that after the Yidden go into Mitzrayim and they enslave, and they go out of Mitzrayim, we describe that process of planting a seed in the earth, which has the Koyach HaTzemeach, and later on the salvation of the Jewish people should sprout. So you have to be careful. What's being planted and what's growing? My instincts are, the pashtus is, and the Rebbe is going to say it in the next paragraph, that what's planted are the sparks of godliness, which Hashem put into Mitzrayim before creation. What is sprouted and what is extracted from Egypt are those same sparks. After the Yidden worked those sparks out, they separated them from Klippa, they elevated them, they refined them, and they included them in Kedusha, and they took them with them. So the simple meaning of Vestach, which is the pasuk from Daf Teira of Pashas Shmois, is that the Yidden going into Mitzrayim was to access the sparks of Kedusha that were planted in the earth in the form of Shviras HaKelim of Tayu, and to lift them up. But there's also the concept of the Jewish people themselves. And L'cha'oira, the Rebbe is alluding to both. Yidden going into Egypt and being destroyed almost in Mitzrayim. The Kura Bazla Mitzrayim almost effectively destroy the entire identity of the Jewish people. That's also planting a seed that the Jewish people should grow and be born as a new nation, like it says in the Pasuk, Ani Hayem Yilidati, when Chassidus emphasizes that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they were born as a nation. And in addition, there's the birth of the sparks, which are being extracted from Eretz Mitzrayim to the Yidden's avodah there. So the language of the Mamer here in these few lines indicates that the sparks that were elevated are not the Jewish people, but the Nitzutei Kedusha. But I think it includes also the Yidden themselves. As it's written before. In Teira'eh, the Pasuk says, the Jewish people are holy, and they belong to Havaya. Reish is to us at the beginning of the Eibishter's produce. Yidden are compared to grain, to things that grow. In other words, Yisrael Nichrutu as Adisham Yidden called the Eibishter's Yuvul, what the Eibishter brings in. When people plant grain, it's because of the subsequent increase in grain, they're going to gain in the yield and what's going to grow. Similarly, the Eibishter planted the Jewish people because of the benefit that he's going to have in the Jewish people. So in these few lines, the Rebbe here is calling the Alter Rebbe in a different place, which is indicating that there's Re'et Sokas of Me'ech Yeshua. This is not going on the Nitzutei Kedusha, but going on the Yidden themselves. Which is the purpose of Golus Mitzrayim, that the Yidden should be born. The Jewish people have planted the seeds in the ground of Commissioner Gaza Boim Yashish Yidden when they come into Mitzrayim take root. And then of course it says Yotzi to Porach Yisrael. Hainu, in other words, Shayrid al Mitzrayim, the Jewish people's descent into Egypt. Is Bedug Masazriya Ba'aras Yashish is being planted in the ground, then germinating and taking root. For example, says Zaydin Gaden Echad, we plant one seed. Many seeds should grow in its place. Similarly, the Jewish people are planted in Mitzrayim, so they should grow out of Mitzrayim on a level completely beyond what was planted in the first place. So here the implication is that the seeding and the planting and the harvesting is Neshamas Yisrael. Earlier in this paragraph, and in the next paragraph you can get a different impression. It goes on the sparks of Kedusha and Mitzrayim. So l'cha'ira it's both, but there seems to be a focus on the Birur and Be'ikah. Inyan Bazeh, and the Rebbe continues. The Gemara says, the Eibishter would not have and did not exile the Jewish people amongst the nations, Ella, only for one reason. In case of converts, even though we know that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of our Avedis. Nevertheless, we say the Eibishter could have found other ways of cleaning us, other ways of fixing us, and other ways of punishing us. Why did there have to be a Churban and a Galus? And the Teretz says, Lo higla ella. If not for this aspect, the Eibishter would have not done what he did. He would have found another way to cleanse and punish the Jewish people and so forth. What is the reason why it's necessary as the Tikkun to Klal Yisrael to go into Galus? It should have an increase in converts and Gedim. Says the Rebbe, Shenem, as the Pasuk says, Uzati aliba orah, the Eibishter plants seeds of non-Jews in the land. So it doesn't mean that Yidden are being planted and Yidden are growing, but Lahadul Klipa is being planted, and then it should say Klipa, which are transformed to Kedusha, are growing out of the ground. Klum, the human nature is you're not going to plant 10 pounds of seeds to get back 10 pounds of yield. You're going to plant 10 pounds of seeds to get back 1,000 pounds of yield. Much, much more than you planted. And the same is true here, that Yidden go into Golus. And the Yidden going into Golus is the planting of the seeds of Nitzutei Kedusha, which are in Klipa, and the Yidden are going to harvest them, and there's going to be a great aliyah. Chassidus explains when the Gemara says that the justification of Galus is for the sake of converts, it can't be only physical converts. Why not? Because the fact is the percentage of converts which have been added to the Jewish ranks over the course of these 2,000 years is very few, relatively speaking. And it wouldn't have made sense. All the hiddennesses and the blockages and the obstacles and the interferences. Shabbos Managol in the times of Golus, Bishvil Misper Muachal Gadim for such a small number of actual converts. El Akavani, and therefore it says the Chassidus and Mistama the Makaravitas in Kabbalah. It just says Chassidus that the justification for Golus is the Nitzut to Sakadusha, the sparks of holiness. Shanof with Vanam Gashman that have fallen into physical things, Shadimtoyim, Mechol Medinas, which are found in all lands, Shasham Gol Yisrael, where the Jewish people were exiled. In other words, it's not just that we're elevating ourselves, or that we're increasing 1 or 2 or 3 human G-dim. We're elevating so many sparks, which increases millions of G-dim. Dafka eat, dafka drink. And use the food and drink for the sake of heaven. They separate. And they redeem. These sparks. And the Rebbe concludes by saying, we call these sparks of godliness converts, even though they're not people, they're energies. They're very similar to a convert. That we know about a convert even before he's converted. He has the spark of a Jewish soul. And the Rebbe is to the Chidah. The Chidah is the source of this, the Midbar G-dliness, which tells you how the Rebbe held from the Chidah. The Chidah says the word that when someone becomes a Yid, is a Rayu as a Yid from before. And there's a Lashon from Baal Shem Tov someplace that if someone becomes Rachman Son a Goy, it's a lie that Shachas the Goyishkeit from before. Gersh in this guy, you don't say a Goy that converts, say a convert that converts. For like Goyish in this guy. It's footnote 11 if you want to look it up. No Jew can train his religion for another. The guy ain't a yachal is guy. The guy cannot be converted. When you have a guy becomes a yid, that's the pshat that he edition neshama from before. Yehudi was on the body of a non-Jew who had a Jewish soul. Vayehu through his conversion. The spark is redeemed from Golos. And there are so many of these sparks which justifies going into Golos. For the benefit of this incredible volume of converts, of sparks, which are sparks of holiness, which is being elevated to the Vayehu of Yidden in Golos. The Jews are exiled. And of course, you all know the word that's brought in Chassidus, that Shlomo HaMelech was able to sit in his house and elevate sparks, and we need to go off into Golos. And there's several points in response to that, but the basic point is that when Yidden are in a higher madrega, they can sit in Yerushalayim and serve the Eibishter of Malkas, Shva, Shama, Shema, Shleima, V'tav Yerushalayim, and the Tzad Shekeneged automatically comes to the Beis HaMikdash. But in the times of Golos, where I say to later, when Antonio Diad Mober, where Yidden are in a lower level, you can't sit in Yerushalayim and shine light and have the sparks come to you. You have to go to where the sparks are. And of course, the second point is that the sparks that Shlomo was able to elevate were sparks which are caught of l'air. There's a very close to the surface access to godliness. Mashenke, the sparks that Yidden are able to access by going into the Golos, they can mine, they can access sparks which are so dark that by themselves they would never come back no matter what kind of light you shine. And for these two reasons, the Eibishter arranged that Niglu Yisrael Bein Umas Elakadesh Yoteis Valeim G-dim, that Yidden go into Golos primarily for the elevation of sparks. The Rebbe continues, V'im b'chol ha'golias keinu, if this is a constant in all Golos, Alachas kam v'kam certainly b'Golos Mitzrayim. The exile in Egypt, Shulei Rak ha'Golos Rishon Bizman, it's not just only the first one to happen chronologically. And Lokam Masher Shchal ha'Golos, it's a source in the root of all the exiles, like the Chazal say, Kol ha'Malchias, Kol ha'Golias, Nikra Moshe Mitzrayim, all exile carries the name Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim is the root and source. And in all Goliaths, the process is the same. Yidden are challenged, and these challenges bring out deeper koiches. And that's this Yidden are challenged, and Yidden find koiches in the world, which they then elevate and serve it. Avedis Hashem, which is called Avedis Habirurim. And both of those things are part of the union of elevating sparks in the world. Shait, simple enough. Yidden left Mitzrayim. They left Mitzrayim, Pari sent along wealth, and the wealth represents the Nitzutz HaKedushim which they elevated. Begins the Rebbe Perik based on, now I have a question. True, when Yidden left Egypt, they took sparks with them, but why do we have to mention Pari as the one who sent them out? He sent along branches and wheat and leaves and so forth and so on. And of course the kasha is, Pari hated the Jewish people. He let them go reluctantly. Why is he sending along Pe'edes? And why is it important enough for the Torah to tell it to us? V'hagdem, says the Rebbe, to be sure, you should know that even though this idea is in Chassidus, the idea of Vayehu Bishalach Pari is so that he sent along sparks of holiness, idea in Kabbalah and Chassidus, but the emes is, you have a remes for it, the Nigla. What's the remes for it, the Nigla? That it says, Vayehu Bishalach, what was meaning Hashem sent out Paris and Yidden at Mitzrayim? When we left Egypt, he accompanied us. This is explained better in a Medrash, which is in Shmeis Rabbo.
On the pasuk, Vayehu Bishalach Parei Esam, V'chi Parei Shalcham, the Medrash asks the obvious question: did Hashem send us out of Mitzrayim? Bilam Maa'mar El Mitziam Mitzrayim. Bilam says we didn't take him out; he took him out. V'karam Ksiv Vayehu Bishalach Parei Esam. Then here it says the Parei took us out, and this is of course before Ma'aseh Bilam. Elam Alama the Teretz is Shaya Parei Malava Eis, that it was accompanying the Jewish people. So there's a Medrash Mefurish that translates the word Vayehu Bishalach Parei Esam. The focus is probably on the word Es, that he accompanied the Jewish people away out of Egypt. And the Rabbi continues, when Parei accompanied the Jewish people leaving Egypt, that's the ultimate submission, the ultimate acknowledgement that the Yidden elevated sparks and took them away from Parei. But the Rebbe teaches the idea that Parei was Malava Yidden and left Egypt as Parei giving them the sparks. So this idea that Parei gave them the sparks is made even sweeter. That the imperative for this idea that Parei, the idea that Parei accompanied the Jewish people was advice from Bilam HaRasha. Shualu was that the Moshe Rabbeinu is the opposite. He's the klipa against Moshe Rabbeinu, like it says, so it says in Chazal. And this is Bilam. And it's because there is a Bilam that it becomes necessary to elevate the sparks of Parei. So Parei's accompanying the Jewish people is learned from Bilam's words, and therefore we attach it to Bilam's words, and we say that Parei accompanied them to be malava the Jewish people, to help the Jewish people. And this idea that Parei accompanied the Jewish people to help them is very similar to the idea that he was giving us the sparks. It says the Rebbe in the bracket, I want to point out, this idea that Parei accompanied the Jewish people and left Egypt is misparish, Medrash not in the Mechilta, because Mechilta is a Sefer of Halacha. So it's a Sefer of Halacha, it doesn't have Seidus. But the Medrash Rabbi, the Sefer of Agoda, and Reiv says it to the Teira Genuzim Ba'agodas, and this idea that Parei accompanies the Jewish people when they leave Egypt to help them with the sparks is a Kabbalistic concept. So this is sort of the end of the first round, the first salvo of this Mamer. The question is, why are we attributing Yetzias Mitzrayim to Parei, attributed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And the teretz is because he sent along with us gifts as a farewell. And we further explained that these gifts were not stam as a gifts, they were the sparks which we had already elevated and they were continuing to elevate, and that Parei was helping us schlep this load of sparks with us as we left Egypt, and in that respect he's helping us take things out of Mitzrayim. And that's the pshat, Vayehu Bishalach Parei. Parei helped the Yidden take along what was with them with the Nitzut Kedusha in Mitzrayim. But the Rebbe asks the question a second time. Ach tzarech lav. We have a kasha with the teretz, but I don't understand the teretz. The kasha is, why does the teretz describe Yetzias Mitzrayim as an act of Parei? And the answer is, because Parei helped the Jewish people out of Egypt. He was helping them carry the sparks of Kedusha, which was elevated in Mitzrayim with them. So the Rebbe's kasha now is, it doesn't make any sense. So we say that that he sent along goodies, which are a connotation or an indication of the Nitzutas which he elevated. Nobody forced him. Parei is the one who said they don't know God. If Parei denies, Parei is an atheist. If he denies the Eibush altogether, what can he possibly give the Jewish people? That's the kasha. So we understand that Yidden left Mitzrayim, they took sparks. We can even understand that when Yidden left Mitzrayim and they took sparks, Parei helped them take the sparks. But Parei is the ultimate enemy of Elokus. So how can he help Elokus? The Yeshleima says that the pshat is, how is it that Parei, who's the antithesis of godliness, ends up helping the Yidden? It says in Teira Eir, Parei Hirkiv, that Parei chased after the Jewish people ahead of his armies. The simple part of the pasuk is he approached the Jewish camp to kill them. The deeper meaning of the pasuk is that when Parei chased after the Jewish people, he brought them closer to Hashem. He brought them to do Teshuva, which is even stronger. And this is the real reason it says Vayehu Bishalach Parei Yasam, because by Parei going along with the Jewish people, he frightened them and aided them to Teshuva, which makes them better than they were without it. The meaning is the in order for someone to do tshuva, it needs to be a place and a thing, which would be the place from which one returns. Meaning to say, you've gone astray and you can come back. If there's no place to go astray, you can't come back. This doesn't necessarily mean tshuva for evil things. The tshuva is bettering oneself. So in order to do tshuva, you have the place in which you left and the place to which you're going. And that's the taich pari hikir shekasha yeshna in the pari Mitzrayim. When you have Egypt and the Pharaoh, it brings us to the level of tshuva. The transformation of darkness to light and bitterness to sweetness. So there's several points that converge here, right? The first is that Ashalech pe'edes v'anafim. The second is ein shiluach b'chomokim ela livui. And the third idea is that the Shaila, the Eibush let Yidden out of Mitzrayim, or did Pari let Yidden go out of Mitzrayim, and he connects it to Birur. And then the fourth idea is Pari Hikir. Hikir Liban Sheyasol, Laviyim Shabashmayim, Pari brings us closer to HaKadosh Baruch. So the pasuk in Parshas Bishalach begins with Pari. He Bishalach Pari Yisrael. The name of the Parsha is Bishalach. Because he gives a koyach to us to go out, he gives a koyach to us to do tshuva, he gives us a koyach to take the yitzia and run with it, to make it more effective. And now let's explain what it is about Pari, which is Me'eda Yidden to tshuva. L'chayda Pari is a Rosh. How is it Me'eda Yidden to tshuva? L'chayda, and moving the question is Eichaf Shaliyas Inyan. The cloud is a Shaila. Not only the Shaila how Pari could be involved. The shaila is not only how could Pari be involved in helping us get out of Mitzrayim. The shaila is bechlal, the whole idea that something starts out as dark and then it is transformed into light. In other words, something bad is made into something good. The shaila is something which is bad, something which is good is good. How could they possibly ever overlap and converge and become one? This Mamer is saying that Vayehu Bishalach Pari means that Moshe helps Yidden leave Mitzrayim. He helps Yidden leave Mitzrayim by accompanying them. He helps Yidden leave Mitzrayim by helping them elevate the sparks and take them with him. But most importantly, he helps Yidden leave Mitzrayim because he's bringing them to Teshuva. Okay? And the Rebbe had several times went back and forth. How could you say Pari? And he answers. How could you say Pari? And he answers. First we say that Pari helps us take the sparks, and then we say Pari helps us do Teshuva. So now the Rebbe is going to explain the Teshuva process. And of course, what you're going to learn from the next Perek, there is a Perek Gimel, and I guess a Perek Dalet, is that the idea that Pari helps us do Teshuva is the ultimate chibur of Havchim. Pari is the Moirid, Teshuva is an Iyan Atzmi, and when you have a Menaged, you have an enemy, it reveals Keiches, deeper Keiches, the Keiches HaTeshuva, and that's going to be how the Mamer is going to connect. Vayehu Bishalach Pari. Pari helps Yidden go out of Mitzrayim. Pari helps Yidden elevate sparks. Pari helps Yidden do Teshuva, and in that process, there's a chibur of Havchim, which is what the Mamer was about. Moving the question is, how could the idea of darkness be transformed to light? When you have a light which is covered over, you can remove the blockage and reveal the light. But when you have something which is dark, black, there's no light at all, where's the light coming from? Light and darkness are two opposites. Especially we're going to the opinion which says in Chassidus, the darkness is not just a lack of light, but it's a separate creation. In as much as there's a reality of darkness, how can you force darkness to receive light? Darkness and light have nothing to do with one another. And the answer is going to be, you're going to bring something which is higher than light and higher than darkness and fuse the two together. A third thing which is a mechaber, two opposites. It says, the Eibush has dominance and rule and fear in his hands, in his malachim, and he makes peace amongst them. Gabriel is the angel of fire. Michal is the angel of water. They don't extinguish another because it says, and how does this happen? The Eibush brings in a light which is higher than both of them. So we should be able to include them and unify them. Just like we understand that in order for Chesed and Gevurah to exist together, there has to be a koyach which is higher than both. Similarly, in order for Cheshach and Er to exist together, there has to be a koyach which is higher than both. The same is true when transforming darkness to light. It requires something which is above both to bring them together. And the Rebbe finishes this first paragraph of Perek Gimel. When we say moving Maaseh Teshuva, this tells us what's special about Teshuva. Teshuva has the power to transform darkness to light, because Teshuva is higher than Teiro and Mitzvahs. Shaydei Teiru mitzvahs nimshachir mogul Teiru mitzvahs reveals a finite light. Hainu Eir, because they're the kind of light shachei shochei b'chmei, the darkness is its opposite to Benagil and disagrees with it. So l'chayda, the shiloh we said before is true, that darkness and light have nothing in common. Darkness is not a light which is covered over darkness, it's a separate creation, it's darkness. And how could light and darkness be brought together in the teretz is tshuva, when a person does tshuva, a light which is infinite is introduced. Darkness is not a concealment at all, and this is mahapech as a cheshech, it transforms darkness into light. And that's the answer to the question. How is it that Pari is taking us out of Mitzrayim, is being malava us, and he's giving to Kiddush? And most importantly, how is Pari bringing us to tshuva? The answer is because Pari is the enemy. And dafka, when you have two enemies, you have to bring a koyach, or there's a possibility to bring a koyach of Eisa Shalom B'mreimov and make a unity between Elokus and the world through Pari. Right? This is the question, this is the answer. Torah begins Pashas Bishalach by saying that Pari kicked the Jewish people out and he went along with them, whatever the particulars are. And the Mamer explains that Pari helped us out of Mitzrayim. Not just by giving us the physical artifacts, but the spiritual, the tzutza kedusha in those physical artifacts, and by being made us to tshuva because of the of Hamshav Fachadim. Let's read it inside now. I guess we read it already. Moving Ma'asa Tshuva that tells us the mile of tshuva, which is the transformation of darkness into light. Because Torah mitzvahs are limited, and tshuva is believable. Next paragraph is Vayehu Bishalach calls. This explains the pasuk Tev Shem Mishem and Tev. This is a pasuk in Kehelas. It's better to have a good name than to have good oil. Good oil is going to go in Teiro Mitzvahs, and a good name is going to be higher than it. The Shem Tev Kayala, the Teiro Mitzvahs, a good name goes on Yiddishkeit, which is called Shemet, which has 7 branches, and the Rebbe is not Meirich in how all of Yiddishkeit, Teir, Aved, and Gemilas Chasadim are included in Shem Tev. We are in Shemet Tev. The Inyan Shem Tev Shem, the idea of a good name is what says Kayal Biran Tzutzes Shabal Umazeh, which is the word Shem. Shem is 340. Shin is 300, Mem is 40. There's Rapach, 288 sparks. The Eibishter's name, Havaya, which comes into the lower world, is Begematria 52, which is Ban. 52 and 288 gets you exactly to 340. So Shem is Begematria Rapach with Ban. Shazeh Unyan Shem, which is the concept of a name Shubagematria Rapach Ban. It's the equivalent of 288 and 52. Which is the Hainu Bir Rapach the Tutza the Shem Ban is correcting the sparks of the Rapach and Tutza through Shem Ban, and the pasuk says Tev Shem Mishem and Tev. That Aveda Sabirurim, and certainly Aveda Satshuv is higher than Teiro Mitzvahs. Aveda Sabirurim, which creates a shame, is Lamaila. Aveda the Teiro Mitzvahs above Teiro Mitzvahs. It brings the second Mamer Chazal. Shloishik Sarim Kesa Teir Kesa Kesa Malchum. There's 3 crowds, and Kesa Shem Tev. El Al Gabei, and Kesa Shem Tev goes on the Keser of Birurim, and he connects it to the letter Tes in Kesa Shem Tev, which is a Tes Rabbi, which shows an koyach that the Yidden have in the infant Birurim. So, Tev Shem Mishem and Tev is saying that Shem and Tev goes on Teiro Mitzvahs. Shem is the koyach to be mahapech cheshech la'ed, and this process of Shem, which is mahapech cheshech la'ed, involves 2 opposites, Nimn'a Nimnois. And the Rebbe connects it to Tshuva and he says Rav and Agan Samais. So in Perek Gimel, we explained the idea of Hishapchach HaSheichel and Nehera to transform darkness to light, that have a koyach from Atzmos, which is above both, that can bring the 2 together. And the koyach that brings the 2 together is higher than both of them. Okay? And the Rebbe continues in Sif Dal, and he says, and this also we learned in one of the shiurim, let's go back to the Basi Ligani, the Tezaim Shem, the Tevish has 7 names that you're not allowed to erase. And Tev Shem goes on those names as well. And he explains the 3 Efanim, right? What Efan is that Eilav Aleilim Esav means the oil which goes into the Keli, that's the part of the shit. The second Efan is Eilav Aleilim Esav means the godliness of the Kelim themselves, which is the Baal Shem Tov shit. And then, of course, the Alter Rebbe says Eilav Aleilim Esav goes on Atzmos, because Atzmos allows for the Chibur of Gvul and Elokus. Let's read it inside now. And Yadu, Tzemach Tzedek observes. Shmevu, Esani B'Shem Tov holds. Shekol, Mashiach, Azam HaKubalim Hashem, is Esesphiris, when the names of Hashem are connected to the Esesphiris, Eina Kavan Al Guf Esphira Mamash doesn't mean the Sphiris themselves. Because that will be a borderline in front of Avodah Zarah. The names of the Eibishter are allusion to Atzmusiyim Husei Yizbarach. So when it says the Eibishter's names, it doesn't mean the Midah, it means the Lakut which is in the Midah. Like it says in the Medrash, you have to have a relation with the Eibishter himself and not to his Midas. Ella, but rather, Akavon Latzmos Alakusam Lubib Spheres, it means the Eibishter that goes into the spheres. So this is the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, the other Baal Shem Tov, Eilav Elel Medeisa, means the Lakut which is Mislabish in the spheres. In the Inyan, Zehuva Gam Beisaf is Lakut Teira, says in Chiddush Chabad Lakut Teira. Avo Lakut Teira, anybody it's unclear what the Pshat is, Akavon Hil Eira Mislabish B'Kelim, the idea of Eilav Elel Medeisa means that Lakut is added to Kelim. Does it mean the light which is added to the Kelim, or the light which gives life to the Kelim themselves? In other words, does it mean oir, which is added to the Kelim, or does it mean the chayes of the Kelim themselves? Explains, of course, and in the second Maa'mar Basi Ligani, this was brought out very clearly. Means the life of the vessels themselves, not the life which is added to the vessels. The pardas that are makos, that Eilav Elel Medeisa means the air which goes into the Kelim. And the Baal Shem Tov holds Eilav Elel Medeisa means the godliness of Kelim themselves, and he brings that raya. And this also we had in the second of the two Maamar Basi Ligani. And the Tzemach Tzedek explains, Shakavan Asab Baal Shem Tov Hilach Chayis HaKelim Atma doesn't mean the light which is added to the vessels, but the vessels themselves. The Tzemach Tzedek proofs in the Kisvei Arizal. Because Arizal explains last line on page Chavav HaHefresh Ben Hadalad Shemis. Shema Vayel Shar Hashem is a difference in the divine name Havai and other Shemas. He says Shema Vayehu Be'edas, the Eibish that invites in the Eid, Vishem Shar Hashem is Eiba Kem, those vessels are in the Kelim. So you have a kasha. The Arizal says that the other names are the Kelim, and the Baal Shem Tov says that means the Elokus of Kelim. Ukadei L'Tava Ben Divri Arizal Shar Hashem is Eiba Kelim. In order to reconcile the words of the Arizal, the Shemas go in the Kelim themselves. If Divri Abba Shed with Doshantas words, Shah Shemes Hein Be'edis, that the light is the Shemes. So therefore we say that the Tzemach says, Torach Leima Kevan Asab Hashem Tov Hi. But the Hashem Tov means to say Leila Eres Sam Sapshem Kelim, not the light which is added to the vessel, the Lachayis HaKelim Atzma, the life of the Kelim themselves. And that's the Chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov over that. He saw that evil says Eilav Medeisa goes on the air which is Mislabish and Kelim, and the Baal Shem Tov says that they are the Kelim themselves. And he says V'nim Tekum Tachayis Itzazei Shapira Shah Baal Shem Tov. Since the Baal Shem Tov says that Eilav Elel Medeisa means the Lakut which is Mislabish and Kelim, and not the air which is added to the Kelim, says the Rebbe, it comes out Shapira Shah Baal Shem Tov, according to the Baal Shem Tov, that Eilav Elel Medeisa, that to him and not to his names means Chayes HaKelim Atzmom is Be'emek Yes and Pirush HaPardes. The Baal Shem Tov's Chiddush is much deeper than the Pardes' Chiddush, because the Pardes said that Amak says Eilav Elel Medeisa means Chayel Eiram Malub Rikem, there's already a vessel. And the light which is added, this is Erev Keli. Even though in the revelation, even though in the Gilui, the Kelim are further away from Malakos than the Eidus. And of course, you'll see later the whole point. It's the fact that the Kelim are far away creates the possibility for Chibur Hafchim. Even though revealed by the life of the vessels themselves, the light and light which goes into them, Hine, Bishar is true to Naliyas is even higher. Like we know about the Yivachaye Echad, the Yivachaye is a higher level, and Yivachaye Echad is a lower level. And we say that Yivachaye Echad is a bigger Chiddush than Yivachaye Echad, and the same is true here. When you say Eilav Elel Medeisa, you mean the air that goes into the Keli, and the Keli, that's not as big a Chiddush as saying Eilav Elel Medeisa, meaning Atmos and Kelim. That Atmos and Kelim are a bigger chibur of Havchim, and therefore it's a bigger chiddush. So the Pardes is Eilav Elel Medeisa is the light which is added to the Kelim. The Baal Shem Tov is Eilav Elel Medeisa is the chayes of the Kelim themselves, and the latter is deeper than the former. Now we're on page Chav Zayin, 10 lines in Ach Adayin Eini Moving. The question still remains. How is it possible that Bechlal Eid and Kelim should come together? In other words, we're saying that the Baal Shem Tov is saying that Echad means the chayes of the Kelim, and the Kelim or Eilav Elel Medeisa means the chayes and the Kelim, and the Kelim, the kash is how could the Lakus come on with Kelim on Mitzias and Yeshes? The vessels are Metzias. How is it possible that the Eibishter which is hidden in the Metzias of Kelim is even higher than the godliness which is Chayei? Therefore, how is it possible that Elokus Yislabish Begarmoi Vishachad Iman, that Elokus should come home with Kelim which are Metzias? And the answer is, it's the same answer that we had before in Pedic Gimel. Well, the Alter Rebbe talked about the two opposites of Cheshach and Eid, and he asked how could Cheshach and Eid come together and enter the Keach of Nimnah and Nemnoi. Similarly here, the Keach which brings together the Gevul of Kelim and the Chayes Eliki which is Ein which is inside of them is a Keach which is higher than both. You have to say that the strength to bring together Lukus and Kelim is Mebechin Shalom Al Mishneim comes from something which is higher than both of them. It's above Ihu and it's above Garmoi. So the Eilav Elamidesav of the Pardes is obviously deeper than the Eilav Elamidesav. I'm sorry, the Eilav Elamidesav of the Baal Shem Tov is obviously deeper than the Eilav Elamidesav of the Baal Shem Tov of the Arizal, because the Arizal speaks about adding her to Kelim. And the Baal Shem Tov speaks about finding the Elokus in the Kelim, which is a deeper inyan. But in addition to being a deeper inyan, it's also a bigger chibur of Havchim. Because Kelim are Metzias. And therefore you have to have a koyach of Nimna and Nimnois. And he finishes, this is what the Alter Rebbe says, that Eilav doesn't go on Oir, like it says in Pardes. Eilav doesn't go on Kelim, the Chayes of Kelim, like it says in Baal Shem Tov, it goes on Atzmos Amhus. And therefore, because of the Yin of Eilav Elamidesav, this is the idea that old people speak about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says the Rebbe, Nimna and Nimnois, since the Eibishter can bring together opposites, he's Machaber, Umeyachad Iyu Megamei, for the Rebbe, for Elokus to become one with Kelim if they have a koyach of Nimna and Nimnois. V'nimtza, so both Pirush both interpretations of a name. First of all, we had in Peirik Gimel that Shem is Birurim, which goes as Begimat and Pach and Ban. And second, and this Habachashechal had in second, well, the idea of Shem is Shiacham Zalzah are both connected. There's a connection between the first idea, which is the Nesilas Keach for Teshuva. And then in order to do this, you have to have a chibur of Havchim. So the first idea, the idea of Hishapach Shechel and Heira is a chibur of Havchim, which allows for the Cheshach of Hishapach to Eid. And the second idea has to do with Shemus. To unify the Chayes of Kelim, which is Elokus, and the Metzias of Kelim, which is a Metzias, is also a chibur of Havchim. Kiva and Shebeshneim, in both cases. In the first half of Pedic Av of the Mamer Basi Ligani, where he talks about Eilav Elamidesav, so there's a chibur of Havchim. Which is the same is true in the second half, where it speaks about the idea of Hishapach HaSheichel and Heira, and to have a chibur of Havchim, the Vakeach of Nimnam Nois, which comes from Atzmos. And of course, in the Mamer for Tashachaf Aleph, the Rebbe connects this to Midas HaNetzach, which he doesn't mention here, but when you have a Milchama and you have a Milchames Nitzachin, where you have to win at all costs, because it's neged to the B'malei Deratzen, this is also the chibur of Havchim, the Atzmos HaNeshama with the Moeded, with the Menagid, which reveals the Koyach to be Menatzeach and the Melchamen Mahapech HaSheichel L'Nehera. Perek V'hinei. So what just happened? We explained the centrality, the place of Pari in Yetzias Mitzrayim. Pari is very important to Yetzias Mitzrayim because his contribution is to be malava us. His contribution is to give us sparks. His contribution is to make us to Teshuva. Why dafke Pari? Because Keach HaTeshuva comes to main safe, and you have to have a Koyach of Nimna and Nimnois to connect Yid with Inyan HaTeshuva. That's why Pari is central. So the Nakuda is that because Pari took us out of Egypt, there's two opposites, Atzmos Amhus and Golus, which were able to converge and be elevated. And this idea that Pari is taking us out of Mitzrayim or accompanying us out of Mitzrayim involves the chibur of Havchim is applied to the Inyanim and the Mamer. So that in each case there's a koyach of Nimna and Nois which brings together opposites. That's it. Sifhei. Ve'hinei continues the Rebbe and he says, Kedei laham shechei Rabbi Ligvul, to bring down an infinite light. Shall yodet yafichas hacheshech le'er kanal siv gimel, to allow the transformation of darkness into light, as we discussed before, which shouldn't be able to happen. And of course we could also add that allows a metzias of keil to be makabel chayas, and two opposites should become one. The koyach of this is nimna nimnois, but nimna and nois comes from Hashem. Hashem does the opposites, brings together the opposites. What's our contribution? So the Rebbe continues in Perek Hey, our contribution is tzarech liyaseh yin bittul. Dafka our bittul makes us keil with this chibur of avchi. He calls man shadam u'mitzias as long as the person has his own identity. Also, if I serve Hashem based on who I am, my relationship with the Eibush is based on me, and what the Eibush does give me is also based on me, which is going to make it limited. And one is bittling his mitzias nasa kli becomes a vessel bechinas habaligavo for the infinity. And that's the idea. Yidden's bittel brings pari along to create this chibur of avchim. Closely in the Golos Mitzrayim, that Golos Mitzrayim was a dark time. As they said in the beginning of the Mamer, the infant that it's talking about Yeshua is both Matzmiach Yeshua of the Neshamas Yisrael and Matzmiach Yeshua of the Nitzutzik Kedush v'Acharech and Yetzu B'Chush Gadol. But along with all that, there's also the bittel. And the bittel allows for these two opposites to come together. And l'chayra here also you can contribute the bittel to Pari. It's because the Mitzrayim creates the bittel and Pari represents the Mitzrayim. But this detail doesn't say explicitly. It just says Mitzrayim, it doesn't say Pari. And the Rebbe says, though, closely in the goes with Mitzrayim Lashon Meitza. This is why the word Mitzrayim means narrowness, it's seen from bittel. The same is also true of Kol Shara Goliath, all the remaining goals that are called Hashem Mitzrayim, Hashem Shemitzias Yisrael. In other words, Ikiri and Agolos, the whole idea of Golos Eini Mashe Gelim Im Keimim. Golos doesn't only mean that we leave our place and we elevate the sparks by going to those various places. Ikiru, the primary end of Golos, it should be Yosef Golos, and one of the Golos he suffers. Mitzidim and Ikim, life is hard. Cholin Yonov. Or Befrat, Ben Yoni, especially the most important thing, which is the man was created on the universe, and this suffering in Golos affects a bittul HaMetzias. So the difficulties in Golos create the bittul HaMetzias, which is Machaber, I guess, nimna nimnois with Pare. Which is another reason why we compare Golos to planting seeds. Because you plant seeds in earth. After you plant the seed, you cover it with earth. Then later it's going to grow. And why is it going to grow? The seed rots. The Rebbe explains that the seed will never sprout and produce new life by itself. It's Yesh has to be rotted away first, which is called Bittul Yesh La'ayin. In other words, so long as the Mitzias of the Yesh nothing can grow. Only when there's ayin. And that's the pshat of the marsh of the tzedakah. You're planting it in the earth. The bittul allows things to grow. And he adds, bittul yeshus that he covered and got on this bittul of yeshus by rotting seeds is it goes into the ground. The ground is opposite of the life, and dafka by the seed going into the ground does it grow. And the Rebbe says, which is the idea of Mitzrayim Meitzer Umeik. Only because of this bittul. Nasa ili godly yes, the advantage happens. This is another aspect. Pare sent us out of Egypt. He's malava us. Pare sent us out of Egypt. He gives us sparks. Pare sent us out of Egypt. He gives us a keich Teshuva. Pare challenges us and gives us a bittul. And all of these things allow for the revelation of Atzmos Samhus Nimna and Nois to be mechaber hafchim. And he finishes at this idea that the tzaddis bring about. The Nimna noise is understood from the pasuk Min HaMeitzah Kerosi Kol Noni B'Merchav Yad, that the Meitzah creates the Merchav, and the number two from the Baal Shem Tov it says Eis Tzara Hili Yankiv Umimenu Yivashad. There's a Tzara time for the Jewish people, and from it they're going to be saved. Not Umimenu Yivashad that we're going to survive the Tzara, but that the Tzara itself is going to bring us the Yeshua. The Tzara's AC is Tzeir. Tzara is the same letter as window, and from the Tzara Nasa Atzmei Seher. That the Golos, the Yisurim, becomes the Golos. That's the Pshat Bishalach Parei Yasa Alman, the gift that is set along with the Jewish people, which was the Bittel, or the Teshuva, which allows that later on, Matzmiach Yeshua's things should grow. In other words, either Parei is responsible for Teshuva, or Parei is responsible for Bittel, in Yidden. And in both cases, this affects the Zeriyah which follows the Golos. Sivvav. Omnam, however, Av Shabi Yitzias Mitzrayim, although when we left Egypt, in the Bishalach Parei Yasa we already Pari went along with us, and he gave us sparks, and he gave us tshuva, and he gave us bittul. Shu in Yibira, and to elevate sparks, like it says in the pasuk, Mitzrayim was emptied. And the Chazal say, like the deep which has no fish, Ubemetzudah she'ein b'dagan, like the nets on land which have no grain, which is almadis kasis gemara and brachas. In other words, there's two types of sparks: sparks in the land, which is called sparks of almadis galia; sparks in the sea, which is called almadis kasya. And Vaynatzos means they didn't miss a single one. Nevertheless, no matter how successful Yetzias Mitzrayim was, Adayan Linda's battle called up not all 288 sparks were elevated to Mitzrayim. V'Hadaya Mashiach didn't come. Okay, do Amasha Kos V'Gam Eidev Rav Al Itam when Yidden left Mitzrayim, they took Eidev Rav. Rav is 202. Shaviyais and Mitzrayim B'Reich Beis. In Egypt, they separated and elevated 202 sparks. And from then till now, Nishiru Pevov, they took 86 Nitzutas. And 86 and 202 is 288. Minyan Ateva. We finish the work of elevating all of these sparks, so then Mashiach comes. The pshat is when Yidden left Egypt, the Gula was not complete. When we left Egypt, it was still possible to be another goal. So we had another goal. The words that we find ourselves in times when Yidden are blaspheming the Eibishter and Yidden are blaspheming the inyan of Mashiach, which is the darkness of the Golos. In other words, it's the ultimate influence of Parei. If you see two generations successively cursing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, wait to the feet of Mashiach, like it says in the Apostle. Hashem is one generation. The second generation. And then it says Baruch Havaya Le'elu. Which goes on Mashiach. And he explains, that when you say twice Amen, it acts as an affirmation. It's also a shvur, which is a shvur shalamayla. It's an oath that comes from on high. The connection between Yidden and the Eibush, the Eibush and Yidden. And shvur is the and the tzaris and the challenges and the lamas v'astate and help reveal the koyches that we have. Then you move in the question is what's the connection between the shvur that we swear and the two generations which are Macharif. And the Torah says, "Yani senes v'kanal shegilei rabligavol 1 year reveal infinity to lavayas tshuva adayis hameitza." So the deirach adayis which challenges us, so we're not nispal from it, and then nevertheless, what we need to do. Ozai tzapei lelaglo shal Mashiach, it gets us to the feet of Mashiach, when there's going to be the true revelation of Bligavol, and like it says in the Apostle, "Ki meiteis cham eretz time," and then it flies, nun flies.